Right, okay. You lot, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can catch all of our videos. And if you're really interested in the Krays, join our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London. You'll find over 1,000 videos and thousands of images. We're moderated and friendly. Come and give us a try.
We resume our story again back to the war years when our mother took our brother Charlie, Ron and me to stay with Mrs. Stiles at her wonderful mansion in Hadley in the Suffolk countryside. When winter came and the snow fell, Charlie made a sledge and without a complaint pulled us for miles to higher ground, where the three of us would cling together as we sped down snowy slopes, screaming and laughing. Some of the local boys didn't take kindly to these cockney boys who spoke funny. Slight as we were, our boxing lessons were something those country boys had never come across before, so after we'd bloodied a few noses, standing shoulder to shoulder, they became a lot friendlier. I could have stayed there forever, but even though her sister May was living nearby, Mum was homesick. You can take a person out of the East End, but you can't take the East End out of the person. That's how it was with her. She missed the closeness of the family, the streets and people she had grown up among, and no doubt she missed her own mother. What was heaven to us boys was completely alien to a woman who had never known anything but London life. Another justification for moving back was the rumour that the whole of the south was to suffer saturation bombing. If nowhere was safe, we might as well face what was coming in familiar surroundings. As the train taking us home left Ipswich far behind, Ron and I made a whispered pact that when we were rich and famous boxers, we'd come back to Suffolk and buy a house as big as Mrs. Stiles's, and all the family could come and live in it. Many of our childish dreams came to nothing, but this dream was one we never lost sight of, and 20 years later we were to return. Back home, a year or so older, an inch taller, and filled out on good country food, we were ready to explore further afield than we had been allowed to before. What we found was an area equally as exciting as the countryside, but in complete contrast. No trees, but broken buildings everywhere for climbing in and around. No fields, but acres of brick and rubble bomb sites to scramble over and dig into. How any of us weren't killed is a miracle, as the bricks became hand grenades, and we became fearless Tommies blowing up the Nazis. I became one of the first casualties in our make-believe war, when a German, in the shape of our cousin Billy Wiltshire, scored a direct hit on my head with a brick grenade. With blood running down my face from a long cut on my head, Ron and Billy walked me home. As soon as Mum saw me, and before she could say a word, Billy said, as quick as a flash, "Alfie Miller did it." What Mum said she'd do to Alfie if she caught hold of him, I needn't say, but I was taken to the London hospital just round the corner, where I had 6 stitches put in the wound. I never liked deceiving Mum, and I hadn't told her a direct lie, but I was pleased that I had not let on that Billy was to blame. Even then, grass was a dirty word. Our cousin Billy was an absolute bastard to us, yet strangely enough we never held any animosity towards him. Because he was older than us, we just accepted the treatment he handed out. If ever a kid was destined to end up on the rope, it was him. Yet later in life he went into the armed forces and served overseas. This seemed to be the making of him, for with his national service behind him he became a changed man, got a job in Covent Garden, and settled down to lead a respectable life with his wife and family. If we'd been told that when he was younger, we wouldn't have believed it possible. He was the wildest kid in the neighbourhood, and there was nothing he wouldn't do. I've seen him jump from a building so high you'd be afraid to look in case he was smashed to pieces, which he never was. One time he was walking down Mile End Road with his cousin Joe, who was nearer his age than us. When passing a shop, he picked up a large toy motor car. He must have known he couldn't get away with it, but that wouldn't have stopped him. When the shopkeeper gave chase, Billy turned round, threw the car at him, and knocked him flying. This kind of behaviour was typical of our cousin Billy. When not tormenting shopkeepers, Billy took to playing tricks on his younger cousins, namely Ron and me. In the type of house we lived in, there was no such thing as a bathroom. The flushing toilet was in a little brick shed out in the yard, and hanging on a nail beside it was a large galvanized bath. When the bath was needed, it was brought indoors and filled up with kettles of water. The alternative to exposing yourself to anyone who happened to walk in the front door was the public baths in Cheshire Street, which was only 50 yards from our house. For a few pennies you could get a nice hot bath in a private cubicle. But if Cousin Billy spotted us going in, he'd wait until I was undressed and in the bath, then climb over the cubicle wall, spring down, and hold my head under the water. Once he'd got me half drowned and coughing and spluttering, he'd go next door and do the same to Ron. He seemed to have a thing about suffocation. Half the time Billy was out of work, and so he'd lie in bed until dinner time if he could get away with it. If I crept next door to number 176, sneaked upstairs and woke him up, he'd grab my hair, push my head under the blankets, and hold me there until I was turning blue. As an adult, it horrifies me to look back at the way we were treated by him, but as lads, it was just part of life, and in many ways, possibly toughened us up, because no matter what he did, we never let him know he'd hurt or upset us. Sometimes that took unbelievable willpower. For weeks, Ron and I had saved every penny we'd earned or had been given. A penny here and there from Mum or Aunt Rose, until the big day when we had 2 shillings and 6pence, just the right money to buy a beautiful cowboy stagecoach we'd seen down the market. It had spoke wheels that turned, a canvas cover, and a little black and white horse between the shafts. We had just got settled in the backyard to play with it when Billy climbed over the fence and said, "I've got a good idea." He didn't hang about to see if we agreed whether his idea was good or not, but set to burying the toy in a pile of soil, then bombarded it with bricks until it was smashed to pieces. If we had told Mum or Aunt Rose about it, he would have been in trouble, but as usual we kept our mouths shut. Despite his behaviour, it seemed that whatever he wanted to do, we followed. Like the time the 3 of us and our friend Ronnie Gill set off from Bethnal Green Station for a day's camping at Chingford. This was a great adventure that Ron and I had looked forward to for ages. Once we got there, and after a long walk to find a suitable spot, we pitched the tent. I had just climbed inside and was trying to decide whether to be an explorer or an Indian for the rest of the day when Billy pulled up all the pegs and dropped the tent on top of us, shouting, "Fuck this camping game, come on, we're going home." During those early days of my childhood, London was taking a battering. There was one period of time, probably the all-out offensive known as the Blitz, when the bombers came every night for 2 solid months. It was so regular that we got used to it. Hard to imagine that explosions, death and destruction could become part of life, but there must be limits to prolonged fear, so eventually you get used to it. The shelters under the arches in Dunbridge Street became a second home to us. I hope children never again have to witness what we did, yet at the same time, it was exhilarating to experience history in the making, a fact I would not be aware of until looking back years later. While I'd been living in the country, I'd seen what to my towny eyes was an amazing sight. In broad daylight, a large brown tawny owl was being chased backwards and forwards by a mob of smaller birds. It never tried to retaliate, just ducked and weaved to escape them. This incident came right back to me as I stood at the entrance to the shelter and watched an enemy bomber being chased by our own aircraft. Another time, I watched a dogfight in the sky between a German Messerschmitt and a Spitfire. Before I was dragged inside, I saw the German plane peel away and spin downwards in a trail of black smoke. Where it came down, I don't know, but I cheered at the death of the Nazi pilot. I told Mum what I'd seen, but I didn't tell her that I'd cheered because I knew she wouldn't approve. Only a few days before, Ron had told her he prayed that Hitler would be run over by a bus, but she had told him, "Doesn't matter who it is, never pray for something like that." Mum had so much generosity and goodness in her, she wouldn't know how to hate anyone, no matter who they were. Ordinary bombs, if there can ever be such a thing, make a high-pitched whistle as they are falling. But the sound we all dreaded most was 4 or 5 seconds of silence. From across the channel would come the pilotless V-1 flying bombs. You could hear the doodlebug droning across the sky. Then the engine would cut out, and those moments until the ear-splitting explosion would seem like an eternity as you held your breath and hunched your shoulders, bracing for impact. Although it was a difficult time for everyone, we did try to make the best of it. During the day, when there was no fear of raids, us kids would collect twisted shards of shrapnel from these and other bombs, and also the long streamers of silver foil that were dropped to blind the radar systems. Foil or shrapnel, one piece is very much like another, but that never stopped us searching the rubble or digging it out of walls with a penknife. I must have had a sackful before I moved on to other things. Uncle John would make us laugh when he came round our house for a cup of tea, saying he must have a homing device somewhere on his lorry because the bombing seemed to follow him around the country. He was a heavy goods driver and kept produce and artillery moving around the country, so he was never called up for service. He was in Coventry when it was almost blitzed to the ground, Southampton and South Wales when they faced their worst bombing, and Barry Island when the oil refineries were blown up and destroyed. Imagine how I felt when I was carting a full load of 10-ton bombs and Jerry starts dropping a few of their own all around me, he said. The war also seemed to give Grandad Lee a new lease of life. Nearly 70 and stronger than men, half his age if the choice was his, he'd have signed up for the duration. As it was, he settled for being the self-appointed entertainment manager of the air raid shelter. Old trooper that he was, all he needed was a stage, which he knocked up from Uncle John's lorry pallets, and of course an audience, captive or otherwise. What it must have been like in a shelter, with nothing to do but worry about where the next bomb was going to fall, I can't imagine, but in ours, it was music hall every night. Grandad Lee sang, danced and tumbled, and like he'd done with his own son Joe, many years before, he'd give each child a turn of sitting on a small chair and being balanced on a broomstick placed on his chin. In return, each child had to do a party piece. When it was my turn, I'd copy Grandad and do a tap dance, and Ron could always be relied on to sing a song. When it came time to climb into the little bunks we slept in, I'd lie there full of pride that the man everyone was clapping and cheering was my Grandad. One night, a warden stuck his head in and said he'd heard German paratroopers had been seen dropping out of the sky. Straight away, my old Grandad was ready to go out and round them up on his own. Mum and Rose talked him out of it, saying he was needed here to look after us lot. And obviously, it turned out to be just a rumour after all. In any case, Grandad had done his share for the country back in the First World War, when he was in the Flying Corps, the forerunner of the Royal Air Force. The Battle of Britain was really the end of the war for us at home. It still went on abroad, but we didn't have to suffer any more bombing raids, so could think of getting back to normal. Normal for us boys meant carrying on with our education, and soon we were enrolled in Dainford Road School. Again, as with infant school, I took to the learning process with great enjoyment. For an East End boy who years later would be referred to almost daily in the media as evil killer or gangland slayer, my childhood was probably more normal and more innocent than that of many of my contemporaries. At home, respect and thoughtfulness for others was taught by example by the family around me, and quite naturally, I carried this philosophy with me into the wider world, so school was no problem, as I didn't dream of kicking against authority in the form of teachers. In fact, I joined in every activity with enthusiasm. The headmaster of Dainford Street School was Mr. Holloway, but the day-to-day school policy was run by the principal teacher, Mr. Evans, a big man full of humour. When interviewed some 25 years later, Mr. Evans said of Ron and myself, "Those twins were the salt of the earth. Nothing was too much trouble for them, and they never refused to help out." Because of his own interest in rugby, he encouraged all forms of sport above all else, and in no time had me playing in the position of right half in the football team. Again, I dreamed of being famous and in my mind saw myself scoring the goal that would win the World Cup. I collected cigarette cards that depicted my favourite players, such as Stanley Matthews, Frank Swift, Tommy Lawton and the Compton brothers. I would stand outside a tobacconist's and politely ask the men coming out for the card in their cigarette packet, which was usually handed over with a grin, or else I would search through empty packets thrown in the gutters. Respectful of my teachers I might have been, but complete angel I was not. I felt the sting of the cane on more than one occasion. Whatever I was caned for needn't have been very serious, for in those days, just being 5 minutes late for school could earn you a couple of strokes. Teachers back then had the idea that they could knock sense into one end by belting the other end. This was accepted in the sense it was given, and no grudges were held on either side. Today I can look back with affection and respect for Mrs. Peacock, Mr. Hawkins, Mr. Evans and Mr. Holloway. Considering that Ron and I had a deal going with our headmaster, surprisingly I never felt I should receive special treatment from him. As Uncle John was driving produce all round the country, this put him in the position of procuring various goods that because of wartime rationing, the ordinary person couldn't get hold of. Usually at night, he would be up at Valence Road bringing in such things as eggs, pork, bananas and sacks of sugar. With Mum's permission, we would make up smaller bags of the sugar, take it to school and give it to him. A week later, he would hand us back jars of homemade blackcurrant or strawberry jam, which his wife had made, a rare treat and the first bit of illegal wheeling and dealing we undertook. Respect for my elders took a knockback when we first became involved with the police. Though EastEnders have always had a traditional wariness or outright dislike of the law, our family was not one of those who taught their lads to vilify the uniform, no matter what their own views were. I can remember at infant school being surprised to hear other 5-year-olds sneeringly talking about fucking coppers and old bill bastards. To me, the local policeman with his domed hat, heavy cape around his shoulders and big solid bicycle was a friendly enough figure who saw us across the road or, as on one occasion, picked me up after I had fallen and skinned both my knees. This conception was blown away one night when Ron and me were shaken out of a deep sleep by 2 policemen demanding to know where our father was. Mum had already explained to us that because Dad wouldn't go to war and kill people, the police wanted to lock him up. So pre-warned, we sat on the edge of the bed rubbing our eyes, yawning and swearing Scout's honour he didn't live with us anymore. This wasn't completely untrue, but being a deserter on the run, his visits to Valence Road were few and far between while the heat was on. We knew that he was lodging with a pal of his, Bob Rolfe, a professional villain, but thumbscrews wouldn't have got us to tell anyone. It wasn't so much what the police did, but how they did it. We could be sitting having our dinner, and the next minute a copper would come walking through the front door and start searching cupboards and under beds and upsetting Mum while he was at it. Knowing we were all related, they'd search the other houses as well. One time Uncle John got a knock on the door. He opened it and a copper said, "I'm looking for a deserter, can I come in?" John said, "Help yourself, you won't find anyone." The copper rushed past him so fast he slipped on the mat and went arse over head along the passage. He picked himself up, put his helmet back on and turned over every room in the house. When he went out in the yard, John followed and there was law everywhere. There was nowhere to hide in the yard except under the tin bath or in the toilet. But as the copper walked towards it, a sergeant next door shouted, "Over here, quick!" Again, brain working faster than his feet, he fell clean over the fence. Just then, John heard a voice inside the toilet whispering, "Fuck me, that was close. Get me out of here." It was Dad. John nipped round the corner, got his lorry and drove up to the front door. The law was still out the back of Auntie May's, so Dad wasn't seen as he shot out of the toilet, jumped in the cab and was driven away. This brings us to the end of another episode. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays. curated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.